Okay, so now we're on to part 2, get pin, and we can start looking over its description. This function is way more interesting and complicated. It's consuming a string and producing an integer, returning an integer, using a big ol' if statement. They give us 4 specific cases, and then they also tell us to make one new case of our own. I just want to mention right here, right now, that this is not how a good real password system works. Yes, there usually is an if statement, but you'll never just have a bunch of pins and passwords as literal values in your code. But that's what this function is asking us to do. This is just a basic kind of example system. It'll work for us for now, but if you ever get into more data, into more systems like this, you'll see this is not how they really do it. They make it more sophisticated. But this stuff right here will suffice now, and they give us some good help. So we're gonna copy this code right here, sorry, these instructions, and go put it as a comment down in our code. So we're gonna go and define our get pin function. I'm sorry, sorry. We're gonna put a comment here first, so we can refer back to this information. All right. This time, we start defining the function. So let me scroll down, get it nicely centered. Okay, we need to define this function and also write some unit tests. If we go and read the description of this, it says that we're going to need to have it be user tested, and we should have at least 4 tests. 1 test for each of the 3 known users, Ada, Babbage, and AC Bart, and then 1 more to represent an unknown user. So that's the otherwise. So these users, they each have a PIN number. The if statement is going to match a given username to their PIN. Ada is 1234, Babbage is 4321, AC Bart is 9999. And then whenever we have an unknown user, it gives -1, indicating that we don't know who they are. It also wants us to add our own username and PIN. Obviously, don't put any like real pins in here. I don't want to know your password or anything for your bank account. After you've written your unit tests, we'll also be able to check to see if BlockPy thinks we're right. So we write our own tests, but BlockPy will also run its own tests. Now let's go and define the header. The name of the function is getPin. And we'll use the def keyword, name of the function, parentheses. This time, however, the function is consuming a parameter. And they say it's a string value. If we go back up, it's a string value representing a username. So that's pretty helpful. It tells us 2 pieces of information. The name of the parameter, good choice would be username. Have a lot of options. Could have been a username, the username, some username, but probably the word username makes sense. And we'll also give it the type string. We also know that this function returns an integer. So we have our get pin. We need to give some documentation. So triple quoted double quotes. And we'll say that this is a function that checks the username to get its pin. And it has args, specifically username, which is a string, the user's username, and also returns a int value representing the PIN of the user, or -1 if they are not in the system. So a little bit of documentation, describe what this function does, and we also need to write some unit tests for this one. So we've already imported the from Sysq108 module and gotten our assert equal, which allows us to write unit tests. So let's write a few. Assert equal always has the format assert that something is equal to something. On the left-hand side, we want to call our function. In this case, it's getPin. We have to pass it an argument. We have to pass it a value. We know that if someone types in Ada, if someone passes in Ada, then it should return the value 1234. That's a good model, so let's copy and paste it a few times. And we have Babbage as another user, and AC Bart as yet another. AC Bart. Now, for Babbage, the username yields the pin 4321. AC Bart, the pin is 999. And they mention that if there's any other cases, return the value -1. So let's make a test case to represent that. Someone will pass in, say, Reese, someone who doesn't exist in the system, and that produces -1. For good measure, we're also going to have another test case of our own. Assert equal for getting pin. We'll add in the user Ellie, and we'll give them the pin 1001. So if we run this code right now, let's see what happens. We're now failing all of our own test cases, but we do have test cases, right? We have made some progress in that regard. And we also see that we're getting some preliminary feedback. Once again, it's found our get pin ADA. It's tried running it, passing in ADA, and the result was none. You returned the value none, but it wanted us to return the value 1, 2, 3, 4. So it found our function, but it doesn't work yet. That's good progress. It's time for us to actually start implementing the function. And here we're going to refer back to the comment that we made before. I just cut it and pasted it down here. And we're going to take this and turn it into actual code, line by line. So we know that this function is going to use an if statement. They told us that. The idea is we check the username. If it's equal to this value, we return one value, and we keep doing that for each of the known usernames. So if the username is equal to Ada, we return 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, around this time, people tend to get confused, and they think that they need to call input username. They think that because we're dealing with usernames and we just defined a function called input username, that we somehow need to combine these two functions. But I'm telling you, that isn't what happens. If we scroll back up to the overall shape of this diagram, and you look at the getPin function, it does not call input username. We'll see that some of these functions do call each other, like handle request ends up calling input request, and pretty soon we'll define login, which calls getPin. But getPin does not call input username. The data that we had for input username, we ended up returning a value, that eventually makes its way to getPin. It flows from one part of the program to another. But input username doesn't call getPin, and getPin doesn't call input username. This is hard to get your head around. If you're not comfortable with data flow, people make this mistake very easily. But it's super important. This is perhaps one of the most important things to understand in doing this project. So we have our username as a parameter. We test to see if the username is equal to Ada. If it is, we return 1, 2, 3, 4. We also check to see if the username is equal to Babbage. If it is, we return a different number, 4, 3, 2, 1. If the username is equal to AC Bart, then we return the number AC Bart. Then we return 9999. Otherwise, we have to return the integer -1. Okay? So if you look back at our test cases, we had all these test cases. I never actually specify anything about Reese inside my code, right? I have Ada, and I have Babbage and AC Bart, but I don't have a Reese or an Ellie. The Reese is not a problem, right? That's not a big deal because the else case handles that for us. So if we try running this now, we're going to only fail one of our test cases. We're failing the Ellie case. We passed in Ellie and expected 1001, but we have -1 instead. So all we got to do is add in a new test case for Ellie, in which case we return 1001. And we'll see if that helps us pass our test cases. It does indeed pass all test cases. BlockPy has moved on to the login function, which tells us that we finished the getPin function, which is excellent. We could have defined this getPin function differently. We might have, instead of returning values immediately, we could have had a pin variable. Pin equals this, or pin equals this, or pin equals this, or pin equals this, or pin equals this. And then we return at the bottom pin. Now with return, both of these two approaches work the same way for this particular problem, for this particular code. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. People prefer different styles. Either one should work though, and you can go with whatever the two approaches you like better. You see, I ran it, just got the same results because it works the exact same way.